All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to what I believe will be the fourth episode here of the Shooting Time podcast. Got a really cool guest on today. I'll get into that here later. But as we've done all these episodes up to this point, we've done them with the guest being someone that I really didn't know all that well up until we got on the got him on the other end of the line. And this is this is the first time actually that I really got to experience some technical difficulties. We actually had our guest produce and record his own sound for this one, and we ran into a bit of a problem at the end with the microphone battery running out that we didn't know about until we were done. So we lost probably about 30 minutes at the end, which for those of you that have been asking for shorter episodes, well, you're in luck this time, mainly by pure chance more than anything. And on that note, we're going to be looking to keep most of the episodes around that hour and a half mark. Sometimes we're just going to go further because things are rolling well, and I guess if nothing else, you're just going to have to listen to it in two chunks. So, but I think this episode went really well with what we had left, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. We're going to catch up with the guest from this one here at a later date, possibly in the fall in a hunting trip. So we'll do a little bit of live podcast then if that works. If not, we'll just have him back on because interesting dude, and I really like talking to him. So with no further ado, guys, let's get ready. It's shooting time. Welcome back to the Shooting Time podcast. We've got a special guest today, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce him as to how I know him, kind of through my history. I know him as a goose caller. He was really the guy that was huge in the Fred Zink world when Fred Zink was pretty much the pinnacle of the goose waterfowl world. I know him as a world champion goose caller, and really more recently as a guy that really seems to respect waterfowl hunting for more than just pile picks and social media attention. He's a river rat. He hunts a lot of dangerous situations, kind of, I guess, like I feel like I do. Just seems like a good guy all around. To me, he's the kind of guy that would be duck hunting even if there was no fame involved or no publicity around it. And I can't say that for a lot of other guys in the waterfowl world these days, and that means a lot to me. So we have Field Hudnall with us from Field Proven Duck and Goose Calls. So welcome on, Field.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it, man.
No problem. Good to have you here.
Yeah.
You were one of those guys that as soon as I started thinking about doing this seriously, that I kind of thought in the back of my mind I need to get on. So glad to have you on the other end right now.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it.
How's life?
Good. Busy. My 5-year-old just started kindergarten today, so he got on the bus at 6:45 this morning, and the way that I convinced him, well, one, he was already excited about going, but I explained to him that we're going to get up before daylight, just like on Saturday is opening day of squirrel season, and we're going to do the same thing on Saturday. So literally while we're sitting out waiting on the school bus, you could hear squirrels cutting on nuts, and I was explaining to him, all right, buddy, you hear that? Then the bus came.
How cool is that?
Yep.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you're squirrel hunting too, because is squirrel hunting. It's funny because it really leads well into something I want to talk about here in just a bit. But squirrel hunting must be a lot bigger thing, I think, in your guys' neck of the woods than it is here.
Well, for me, it used to be huge. My dad, as a kid, we always used to go camping on opening night or opening evening of squirrel season. We'd go camping, then we'd hunt, opening day of squirrel season, and that was a ritual. That was an annual thing for us. And I can sadly say I have not been squirrel hunting in years. And for some reason, my son, he's just now points out birds and critters. And I'm like, you know what? I want to get back to squirrel hunting. I want to start my son squirrel hunting like my dad did with us. I doubt we're going to go camping because I don't remember the ticks being as bad when I was a kid as they are now.
Things.
Yeah. So, but no, squirrel season, the bad thing about it is we're in a huge whitetail area. So a lot of guys that are diehard deer hunters, they don't want any squirrel hunters out this time in August.
Chasing deer around.
Because we open up in September for deer. But I got a little place we're going to go squirrel hunting. And again, I don't ever get bit by the big buck bug. So I'm not really too concerned about deer. Dude,
you're like impressing me more and more because I'm the same way. Like I could care less about a whitetail. And I've always told people that I attempt to, I buy my archery tag every year, and I haven't hunted deer and a whitetail in 10 years because it's always right when you should be chasing mallards.
Right.
I cannot get myself to go after the things. So that tag just sits there. I don't even ever fold it and put it in my pocket. It just sits on the shelf.
Yeah.
It looks good though.
Yep. Now don't get me wrong. I love deer hunting. In fact, my wife and I, we haven't bought beef in probably 7 years because all we do is eat deer meat. My dad, he's retired USDA meat inspector. So when years ago, he always helped process deer. And then that's what I also do on the side is process deer. And my goal is to put 7 or 8 does in the freezer each year. And if I get bit by the big buck bug, those does will probably reduce to about 2. And I don't really care about antlers. I love shooting deer, though. Don't get me wrong.
Well, they don't taste as good as the meat does.
Right, so. Right. I love shooting deer. It doesn't matter if it's a doe or a buck.
Oh, that's cool. I like that theory.
I love eating them.
I've really started getting into that same mindset myself. I've shot an elk the last 2 years, and so we've been the same. We haven't bought beef other than in a restaurant, for a long time. So it's kind of cool just to build. And then between that, you take turkeys, ducks, fish, elk, geese, and the guy really doesn't. We haven't bought anything other than some seafood or something that you can't just get or catch.
Right.
So it's kind of cool. It takes it to a different level, and it kind of adds a whole nother dimension to the hunting side, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. Now I love a ribeye steak. I will. We buy the occasional big old fat juicy ribeye. Don't get me wrong there.
That's hard. You can't really get the same flavor always out of venison. Now an elk is a different story. That might rival a ribeye.
Yeah.
I would say if you got elk backstrap, that's close.
Right.
So actually, I think this is your squirrel story brings up a couple of things that I find interesting. And you mentioned how the ritual of the squirrel hunt is something that you guys did. And there's a conversation I've had before with people, and I think it seems that in a lot of these hunting things, and one reason that I think we're losing hunters is somewhere down the line that ritual has been broken.
Right.
And once that is broken, even once, it's really hard to get that stuff started, especially when there's multiple people involved. And one place where I really noticed it was I worked for Cabela's for quite a few years as one of the store managers in our Mitchell, South Dakota store, which is like world headquarters for pheasant hunting. We had people from around the world come, and we'd do ungodly amounts of business in this little tiny store the day before pheasant season. And what would happen is you would see, and I think what we were seeing happen is traffic would slowly get decrease a little bit every year. And what's happening is pheasant numbers would go down. And so, maybe 5% of guys would say, let's not go to South Dakota this year. And I think as those traditions break and they break that ritual of going one time, all of a sudden it's really hard to start that back up, especially if you want to have multiple people involved. And then as soon as you do that, it just whittles away. If one guy quits going deer hunting for a year or duck hunting for a year, it's really hard for them to start back up because they just kind of feel like they're out of it, or their buddies don't do it anymore, or however it is. So I think that value of having that ritual and starting it with your son at a young age like that is super important to get him started. I mean, I don't suspect you're going to have any problem having your son be a hunter.
Right.
But I think just that idea of those rituals is a huge thing for hunters. So to see him get started on it and be interested in it already is really cool.
Right, right. No, it's, and I never really looked at it until I became a dad on, all right, how am I going to get my son introduced into hunting? And I look at how my dad did it. There was it was always fun. You wanted to be successful, but the whole point of the squirrel hunting wasn't necessarily, honestly, I can't ever really remember shooting that many squirrels, but it was the camping, it was the campfire, it was the cooking the bacon, it was, going out collecting firewood. It was the whole experience that made it, so exciting. And I've got really strong feelings about how you can properly introduce kids into hunting. I feel like small game is the perfect way to introduce a kid into hunting. I know too many examples of where, and the reason behind it, I don't know. I mean, I feel like social media is a huge, I don't want to say problem, but it is.
It is.
So many people are introducing their kids. Sometimes the first animal they shoot is a 160 whitetail. Or there's these standards all of a sudden that, you need to shoot trophy deer. You need to shoot, greenheads. You need to shoot whatever happened to squirrels and rabbits and, starting out.
Teal.
Yeah. And this is a whole different topic, but I just feel like for a kid, you work your way up. It just seems like years ago, it was like, well, what was the first thing you ever hunted? Well, all of us started squirrel hunting. I mean, whether it was with a 410 or a 22, because that was the introduction to the outdoors. And as a dad, I just feel like taking my son squirrel hunting, it's going to be a walk in the woods. I do not care if we shoot anything. But what I'm not going to do is I don't want to introduce my son into something that there's a higher expectation of performance, because he's 5. All right. And again, we may not even shoot anything. The time when we get in the woods, he may not even want me to shoot the squirrel. And I'm fine with that, especially at this age. So I don't know. I'm still learning this because this is literally going to be the first time. No, I take it back. My son did go turkey hunting with me, and I did shoot a gobbler in front of him, and it was the best experience. But it was.
He dug that?
He loved it, man. It was all I wanted to do. I just want him to hear one, and for us to actually connect on one, I was not expecting that, but it was very cool.
It seems like the odds of that, as soon as you bring someone with to show them that, you're like decreasing your odds by 90%.
You are. Yeah.
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 Just by pure chance, that's how it always works out. You try to give them that cool experience and, shoot, we didn't see anything, which isn't necessarily bad in itself because it shows them kind of what hunting is. And if they're still interested after that, well, you've kind of set up that they're probably going to be interested once it really does happen.
For sure. And I'm almost kind of disappointed that the hunt happened so quickly the way it did. I'm glad and I'm disappointed. One, because now he expects it to happen that way. You go out there, you sit there, you got all your snacks, and then right at daylight, a big gobbler comes running in. No, it doesn't happen that way.
Time that happens.
Oh, I know.
Around here, or at least in South Dakota where I hunt, I've come to the expectation that I'm solely getting up in the morning to be out at sunrise just to hear birds gobble. Right. I never have an expectation of shooting one off the roost anymore. We never do.
To be honest with you, I cannot remember the last time I shot a gobbler that early. I never shoot them that early. It's always around 10 o'clock to noon, between that 10 and 2 period. So to shoot one that early, I haven't done that in years. And now my 5-year-old thinks that that's routine because that's the only hunt he's ever been on. So,
Dad, why didn't they come in right away?
I know.
Next time you're out.
Well, son, actually, it's a lot of sitting and walking and not shooting anything.
Swatting mosquitoes and ticks. That's how it goes usually.
Absolutely.
That's funny. And not hearing anything. So getting back to your squirrel thing, I think, and I'm not going to say that I'm a big squirrel hunter. A lot of it's just because our seasons start now at the same time that elk seasons start and early goose season start. So they overlap, and that doesn't make the priority list for me. But I think it's that perfect opportunity for a guy to get out and show kids. And you're in very controlled situation because the squirrel is up in a tree. It's not the deer thing where you have to be super quiet. I mean, obviously you're not going to make a ton of noise.
Right.
It's not like ducks where the ducks are unpredictable and flying. So it's actually the perfect opportunity for that.
Right.
So one of the questions that we want to talk about is it seems that there's just from listening to other podcasts and just other people we've met and seeing things on social media, it seems like that Kentucky area, there's a lot of like hardcore dudes that are into duck hunting, fishing, blowing duck and goose calls. What do you think it is with that terrain, the people, the culture that brings that out of people or that really develops that? Or am I totally off base? But it sure seems like there's a lot of guys from that area that do a lot of everything.
Same here. I mean, born and raised southern Minnesota, but I've been around the scene quite a bit most of my life. And there's a couple areas I've always tipped my cap to. One of them is Louisiana, actually, and I won't get into that. But the other one is Kentucky. It seems like whether it be stories or people I've met, there is a solid hunting scene there. Like guys that don't discriminate game very much, seem to appreciate it all. Not only the hunt, but the harvest and the eating too. It just seems like there's some really good outdoorsmen in that area.
Right. I think the thing about Kentucky is what's interesting about Kentucky, so like where I live basically 30 miles northeast of Louisville, right on the Ohio River. Kentucky is made up of different areas that excel. What's the wording for this? They have different levels of quality of hunting. For example, where I live, it's actually some of the worst waterfowl hunting I've ever experienced. Everywhere I've traveled, it's some of the most inconsistent waterfowl hunting. We have our days, but overall, we're not really in a flyway. I think they just put us in one just so we feel, like part of the group, but it's not ideal for waterfowl. Now, if you go 4 hours west, you're still in Kentucky. Now you're in Paducah, Henderson, Hickman, which is historically known for having some of the best waterfowl hunting in the country because it's right there by southern Illinois. It's huge waterfowl heritage. Now, where I live now, so that's central Kentucky's where I live. Western Kentucky has the waterfowl. As soon as you start going east and southeast, now you're in elk country. Eastern Kentucky they call it the land of 10,000 elk. There has been rumors and talk about the potential next world record coming from Eastern Kentucky because we have very mild winters. There's no mountain lions, so there's no natural predators other than the rednecks that live in Eastern Kentucky.
Elk steak.
Yes.
And antlers.
Yes. So actually the area I live in is phenomenal turkey hunting and whitetail hunting. We've got huge whitetails in our area. We've got a lot of turkey, but the turkey is really just recent. I say recently, the populations have just increased. I remember my brother was 16, so that would have put me at 13. I remember hearing my first gobbler. I'd been deer hunting, I'd been squirrel hunting since I was 8, never saw a turkey, never heard a turkey. I remember specifically hearing my first gobbler. And then since then, the populations have just exploded. So when you lump Kentucky, you've got waterfowl on the western side of the state, you've got deer and turkey in the central, you've got elk in the eastern part. So there's a little bit of everything. The area we live in, again, as far as waterfowl, our rule of thumb or my rule is we don't get a lot of anything, but we get a little bit of everything, which does make it very interesting. We'll go out on the river and we'll shoot, on one day we might shoot mallards, we might shoot widgeon, we might shoot pintails. And then on the next day, you might see nothing but divers. And then on the third day, you may not see a duck, period. And the thing about, again, where we live and just big river hunting, no matter what happens on one day has no bearing or significance on what's going to happen the next day. If anything. It's kind of our common joke is if we go out on Monday and we have a bang up shoot, you might as well sleep in on Tuesday because it will not happen again. I promise you. So
I've witnessed the same thing.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I don't know if it's just, And that's what makes it tough about our area is if you only had the weekends to waterfowl hunt where I live, it would probably be pretty disappointing. But my brother and I were very blessed and fortunate that because of our work, we can hunt every morning if we want to, and kind of pick and choose the days that we want to go. So that Monday through Friday is normally when we have our better hunts. And then Saturday and Sunday, anymore, I probably hunt less on Saturday and Sundays than I do during the week, just because my kids, my wife's off work, my kids are home. I'm going to make them breakfast, and it's probably even going to be like that more often now since my son just started kindergarten today. My weekends are going to belong to him, and then Monday through Friday I'll be out there hunting.
That's cool.
But
there's something to be said about those weekday hunts. It was one of the few benefits of working retail for a bunch of years was that I had typically worked weekends and I was off Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and I actually volunteered to have just no weekends off during the fall because it was a marked difference in our success on a Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday versus a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday.
Yep. Or
a Monday after they were beat up after getting shot at and chased around every day.
Right.
Give them a day to settle back down, especially because we hunt a lot, especially late in the season. We hunt that Missouri River stuff, and it's high pressure, and it's probably similar to what you see.
Right.
So would you basically consider that the Ohio River is kind of your duck hunting home then?
It's definitely home. I mean, literally, so my house, it's probably 300 yards from the river. I mean, I can see the river out my back deck. My brother, he lives 3 blocks over, and he lives right on the river. The boat ramp is 350 yards from my house, and then my shop is 3 blocks the other way. So, I mean, it's all right here in our little town. So,
that's convenient.
I mean, yeah, we're right here.
So maybe that's one of the things I want to talk about you, since I know that I love hunting rivers. There's a few reasons for that. But maybe just kind of explain like what the Ohio River is like to hunt. Cause it's one of the bigger rivers in the country, really, isn't it? It's got to be top 5, I would assume.
Yep.
Something like that.
The river is approximately in our stretches. I think I ranged it one time, and it's like right at 850, 900 yards across. We have
that's big.
It is. We have barge traffic year round. So the barge traffic does not shut down like it does on certain parts of the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
It's a very deep river, but it's a fairly slow moving river unless when it's at pool. It's not nearly as swift current as the Missouri River or the Mississippi River. It's a slower moving current. I've only seen it freeze over twice, and last year was one of them. It didn't last more than a day, but it was solid ice all the way across. And we have, again, where we're at, we have really steep hills around us. So we're kind of right where agriculture and hills meet, which is why it's not necessarily the greatest waterfowl area.
Yep.
We don't really thrive on backwater around us because when the river rises, it just gets deep and fast. We have some creeks that'll flood out into the fields, but we don't have a lot of backwater around here. And really, as far as we don't have sandbars, very few sandbars. We don't have the wing dams, the regular wing dams like you see on the Mississippi and the Missouri.
Yep.
So it's a different style of hunting. You can be right on the bank.
About that.
Huh?
So that's one of the things I was curious about, because like I've seen a bunch of your photos, and it looks like you're just out hunting in the current. Mm-hmm. Whereas we try to avoid that. And because that's one of the things about a river hunt is there's so many different ways. Like you say river hunt, but I can think of 4 or 5 different big scenarios. You can have like way upstream on the Mississippi River where it's a fast kind of ripping, like a fly fishing type thing with rocks.
Yep.
Or the Missouri has that way up in Montana. Then you can move into like the reservoirs on a river. You can have a place like I hunt, which is it's not necessarily backwater, but it's marsh. It'd be like the alluvial, like the fan type stuff where the deposits start to settle out, and you see that marsh scene set in. And then you can have that big, deep main channel thing, like I expect, like what you're hunting, or
right.
If you're down on the Missouri in Kansas, or the Mississippi in southern Iowa, Illinois, and that stuff. So there's a bunch of different things, and I've always kind of been a little curious on how guys actually hunt that where you're in the main channel and you have to like deal with barges and you have to deal with keeping your decoys anchored in deep, fast water. And
that's our biggest challenge. Yeah.
Yep.
No, you nailed it. We hunt the main channel of the river, and the biggest challenge we encounter is what our backdrop is. So we have really steep hills. So trying to find locations to where those birds can actually work to where they're not flying into the trees. There's very few spots up and down the river to where you can have good visibility. You can have where it's shallow enough to even, one, let alone wade, but also two, to get decoys to hold. So we run about 20-foot lines on all of our decoys just in case, because when the river does jump up, you're going to be setting in 15 foot of water, and then when the river rises, all it does is get faster current, as you well know. I hunted with Casey Hop for a buddy of mine from Minnesota, and he came down to hunt, and it's like anything. Anytime you invite people to come hunt with you, something goes wrong. And he came down and hunted. The river jumped up. We had decoys with 1 pound weights on each decoy. And some of them even had 1.5 pounds. We were picking them up a mile downriver.
Oh, my.
I mean, it was just, you're literally sitting there watching your spread, just each one of them break off one at a time. And you're just constantly picking up.
And in that case, it's not convenient to just get your boat out just to chase one either. It's a project. Exactly. Yep. You let half your spread float away. You go retrieve them, bring them back. Exactly. Yep. Man.
Yep. And he shot for some reason, he wanted a pintail, and the stars aligned, and he shot it. I mean, it was in that flood water. I think we had maybe 24 decoys out. The furthest one might have been 15 yards, and he had a beautiful bull sprig just come in, and he just smoked it right at 15 yards. So, I mean, it made his trip, and I was surprised that we even got that done.
The fact that you would get a pintail on open water is, one, a success.
Yeah.
Two, you had him that close is a success, and with decoys and everything being jacked up, so he got super lucky.
Oh, man. We were just going out there to burn daylight. And we shot a few ducks, but it's just stuff like that always seems to happen. Not ideal conditions at all.
More times than not, when I take someone that is a guest that isn't like one of my normal hunting buddies, you're almost guaranteed that it's going to be a lackluster day. I had one guy that I worked with, and he'll probably listen to this at some point, I took him, I think, on like 5 different hunts. So he wasn't like the guy I normally hunted with, but whenever I could try to get him out, I would. And he loved to duck hunt. And I'd tell him all these stories about how many birds we'd shoot the day before, 2 days before. I said, dude, you got to come with. Thursday, it's going to be good. And he'd have Thursday off. And I don't think over those like 5 hunts, I honestly don't know if we shot 5 ducks. I mean, some of the worst 5 hunts I've ever had have been with him. I mean, they're fun, but they're still like, it wasn't what you want. And you're like, God dang it, man. I don't know. He's just like, has that, carries around a bad luck horseshoe in his pocket whenever he's with me. So,
Yep. A buddy of mine that I started running around with in high school, a buddy of mine named Daniel. He hunted with my brother and I all the time. And the joke was, it was actually just the opposite. So whenever he would go with us, it would be phenomenal. And then he would always have something else that came up, which he loved hunting, which his dad was a big farmer, so he stayed busy with that as well. But we'd go out there, have a heck of a hunt, high-fiving, all right, man, we'll see you here tomorrow. And he'd be like, I'll call you, which means he's not coming.
Exactly.
We would go out there and maybe shoot one or nothing at all. Now, this is not just one isolated case. This has been over years, repeated times, and the joke is call Daniel, see if we should even go tomorrow. Or call him. If he goes, great. If he says no, let's just all stay in because it's not going to pan out. Like, I've never seen anything like it. But you're right. There's
way to predict the future that no one else does.
And he's not even putting logic behind it. He's not looking at weather. He's not looking at anything. He's just like, well, no, I'm going to go shoot clay pigeons, or I'm going to go, I don't know, shoot blackbird. Man. Whatever. Just random. I mean, he should have played the lottery.
Luck like that is not easy to find. I can tell him that firsthand.
Yeah.
So back another thing about the river. Yeah. So what's your guys' migration there? Like, is it for those who didn't
hardly ever?
This isn't going to be on video, but his eye roll and his huff he just made tells you all that you need to know right there.
Well, and also, how has it changed? I mean, from when you first started hunting the Ohio to today?
We hear him.
Oh,
what he just
okay.
said?
He just asked about
How it's changed from when you first started hunting the Ohio to today.
Oh, gotcha. How it's changed? That's a good question.
Because I can only assume it's changed since you were younger.
Correct. As far as number of birds, it's been less geese, actually. The duck hunting has always seemed to have been pretty stable. It's pretty inconsistent, but you always have your strong days. It does seem like we're seeing less numbers of Canada geese. One thing that's interesting is we are seeing more snows and more specks, and this is all within the last 10 years. There's not necessarily more hunting pressure on the river because it kind of comes and goes. There's probably about 8 different groups of guys, and we all know each other. We kind of stick to the same areas. We'll bounce around sometimes, but half of them all live in the same little town. And any new guys that come to the area learn real quick, it's not that great. So they kind of get burnt out, and then once deer season hits, opening day, of course, there's a lot of boats. But then as the season goes on and these guys sit around and watch empty skies for a while, they get other interests and move on to deer hunting or what have you. But as far as around us, man, really things have not changed that much, as crazy as that sounds. Our tactics have changed. We run bigger spreads. My brother and I have always been a fan of decoys. We love decoys. We love hunting over big spreads, which is my dad hates decoys.
Oh, man.
When he used to take us out hunting, he would kick the decoys. He would gripe and complain about we have too many. And it's kind of always been my brother and I's joke that we're going to get more decoys just to irritate my dad. But I love hunting over big spreads. Our blinds that we build are kind of getting bigger and more comfortable since we're getting older in age. You know, they're a little bit
and
warmer.
you have more resources.
Getting smarter.
Exactly. More resources, and you learn that they're just as effective, if not more effective. We used to hunt on the bank. Either we'd build a brush blind, or we'd use the, I remember when the Final Approach Eliminator blinds came out, we would stack those up on the bank, and you're laying there on the riverbank. That's cold, especially when you're not shooting any ducks.
On your back.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I remember we'd get up and sprint up and down the bank just to try to stay warm because there really weren't that many good clothes. You're wearing either fireman boots as waders or just, the equipment was
Isn't
horrible.
it amazing, too, how a single flock of ducks or geese immediately warmed you up in that situation? You could have gone from shivering to one flock of ducks coming in and you're shooting at them, and no one's complaining about being cold for the next half hour.
Exactly. Yep. And that's, again, our joke on the river is if we shoot, and again, we enjoy hunting with a lot of people. We'll hunt 5-6 people consistently. Our blind, you can shoot 9 people at a time. If we shoot 3 ducks, that's what we call a river limit. Sometimes it's even 1 duck is a river limit. We didn't get shut out. We didn't zero. It was worth going out there because I can promise you there's a lot of 0 days. But no, I mean, as far as how it's changed over the years.
You did mention that those snows and specks are coming. Trying to think of your guys' flyway. Are those birds, you think, coming out of the eastern flyway? Or are they coming from like Central and Mississippi?
Yep, they're coming from Mississippi flyway. So you go back in the early 90s, late 80s, Henderson and Paducah, Southern Illinois, those were the glory days for Canada geese. I mean, there was arguments. What was really the goose capital of the world? Was it Southern Illinois? Was it Easton, Maryland? Paducah, Henderson, they thrived. Everybody there was a goose hunter. They all had goose pits. They all had big goose spreads. That was where you went to go goose hunting. Now, those guys talk about if they see a Canada goose. They don't go there anymore. But the ducks are there and the snows are there by, very large numbers. So what we've noticed, not only from where we hunt, but we do a direct consumer show up in Indianapolis called the Indianapolis Deer Turkey Waterfowl Expo. And for the past 10 years, we talked to a lot of waterfowl hunters that hunt the western side of Indiana. When you talk to the older guys, that had been hunting for the last 50 years, they talk about how there used to be a lot of snows and specks in Indiana. We've never seen them. In the last 10 years, we're getting a lot more requests for speck calls. We're hearing stories about guys who are shooting snows, a lot more specks, central and western Indiana. So those are a lot of the same birds that we're starting to see now as well. What's causing that shift back over? I don't know. But it's definitely a trend to where there's more specks and snow showing up in our area.
That's interesting that they'd be coming across from the Mississippi going that way rather than down to like the Arkansas, because I know those guys are seeing a lot more too than they ever have. So it's it's always interesting to me. It's one of the things I love. Cell phone. I love about about duck stuff, and we've talked to a few guys already that are kind of on the sciencey side of the waterfowl world, and listen to them talk about how the migrations just change, and it's cool to hear it backed up, by guys in the field. So. And it's stuff that you don't really notice, and it takes a while to actually recognize it as a trend. Like if you all of a sudden see a flock of specks, no one's going to say, "Oh my God, the specks are here." But like you said, over 10 years, and you see it happen and happen again, you're like, "Oh wow, this something actually changed in their habits and in their flight and in their heads that brings them there every year." So I think that's kind of interesting.
For sure. Yeah, it's like Sandhill Cranes. Kentucky now has a Sandhill Crane season, but you have to draw a permit for it. You don't just get it over the counter. But over the last probably 10 years, we see a consistency in about 3 or 4 days straight. It is constant Sandhill Crane migration. When it happens, it's a little bit harder to predict. Typically, it's like late November. But I mean, through the night, through the day, you'll hear them.
Oh, yeah.
But you really have to look for them. I mean, they are way up there,
Circling.
But it's just constant all day long.
Flying in a big circle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they circle their way. Yes. But you hardly ever see them in a cornfield around here. They don't stage here. They just fly over. Correct. Yep. So, there's been a lot of talk about guys wanting to start Sandhill Crane hunting in our area, but nobody really has the decoys yet. Nobody really knows the technique for it yet. And again, you're not going to just drive down the road and see a field full of Sandhill Cranes and say, "Hey, let's go hunt them." It's a new species. I say new again. About the last 10, 12 years, we started to really see them. So it'll be interesting to see what happens the next 10 years on sandhills around our area.
Sandhills, I would definitely say that's one area that I'm not educated on in terms of hunting. I know a couple guys who've done it a little bit seriously, and it can be. I know there's some different techniques. Like guys almost use decoys as like a blocker. I've heard of this technique where they would do it opposite of how you do it for goose calling or goose hunting. 'Cause I think they see so well is that they'll set decoys up in a field and almost use the decoys to like push the birds to another part of the field where the guys are hiding. So it kind of goes away from exactly how you would like normally try to decoy birds, but supposedly it works fairly well. So here in South
completely
Dakota,
foreign to me.
Here in South Dakota, we have a pretty good migration through the central part of the state. It's about an hour and a half to my west of where I live. And we can hunt them there, but it's one of those things that's very underutilized as far as a game bird. I mean, I know maybe 2 or 3 guys that even attempt it. So
really,
but what's strange about sandhills, at least for me, is I was always told that they have really good eyesight, which I know they do, and that they're so hard to hunt. Your concealment has to be perfect. They pick apart your decoys, all that kind of stuff. But now this must have been, I lose track of time, but around 5 or 6 years ago, I still stay in contact with a lot of the guys in West Texas and Oklahoma, and they told me that the sandhills have been saving their hunting seasons, that they're running big sandhill decoy spreads and doing really well. So I'm curious to know what their exact tactic is, or why the birds would be possibly easier to hunt down in Texas, if that's more of a winter ground for them, or...
Yeah, I'm sure it's a wintering ground. They're probably doing the deal where they're digging in and doing all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
too,
they are. They're digging in.
I think most people up here would never dig into a field for a duck.
Right. Probably better equipment too.
Yeah.
I know a buddy of mine, Grant Doyle, he owns Deception Decoys out of Kansas, and their main bread and butter is custom sandhill decoys. which I know a lot of those guys in that area, they've been shooting sandhills for years, and there's outfitters who focused on sandhills alone. And he's invited me out several times to come out and hunt. I need to just pull the trigger and do it because it's something I'm very intrigued in, but I have no experience whatsoever.
They're a cool bird. I've seen one shot in my life, and when we picked it up, I mean, they're like a dinosaur. Those big feet dangling, and watching them come in, it's something else seeing those feet drop. I mean, anybody who hunts mallards knows, like, the minute you see those feet kick out, that's the minute. But when you see those feet kick out, it's a whole other deal. They're so big. Like, they're just dangling. And I even want to, I've never gotten to work, but I've tried getting pictures of them a few times in the spring, just because I love those pictures that guys have when they just drop those feet down and they have this big gangly things coming in. It's a cool deal. So problem is when they're around is when there's mallards around, and like everything else, that's where my attention goes. So I can't get myself to give up one day of mallard hunting to go shoot some cranes that I've never done before in my life.
How's the field-proven Sandhill Crane coming along, or the call?
Sandhill call.
A Sandhill, man, we've got so many other irons in the fire right now that we got to get caught up on.
Could you imagine you have like 8 guys that would be interested in the Sandhill call, probably? Actually,
I know Deception.
If you've got a goose
Deception has one that sounds awesome. It sounds really
Can they
good.
actually call them? I mean, is it like a goose at all? Do you know?
Yeah, they swear by it, man. I know Grant has sent me some images and some video, and they decoy. He says they decoy phenomenal. Great. I've never seen video of them working the calls, so I'm not really sure if you can actually turn them or how that works, but I'm very interested in giving it a shot and seeing what it's about.
I think it does work. I've heard that too. And really, if a guy has just any short reed, you pretty much have a sandhill call, especially if you have like a half breed. They're really good at doing a sandhill call. I remember I used to watch old videos. I think Tim did it on some like his old, like super old instructional stuff. So I was like, what?
Yeah. When I was, let's see, I think it was year 2000, I went out to Great Bend, Kansas for the Pattern Master Open Goose Calling Championship. And that was a fun weekend because they had like 10 contests all within a couple days. And they had the World Championship Sandhill Calling Contest. And basically all it was is all the goose callers are using their goose calls, fluttering their tongue in them. Half these guys are from Illinois, Ohio, never even hunted a sandhill.
They don't really know what they look like. They heard it on a video somewhere.
Yeah. So you basically got goose guys fluttering their tongue in a short reed goose call, trying to, make somewhat of a sound. And I think the guy that won it, he actually just did a mouth call. And he was actually from Kansas, so which, makes sense. But now I know that there are some specialized sandhill calls out there that really do sound
Really
good.
replicate it.
It's not just a modified goose call.
That's cool. Kind of one of those things that's probably just created, like the thing has created itself. I mean, there's probably not a huge market for it, but you get those niche guys that really love them.
For sure.
So,
and I think that's I think the sandhill hunting's gonna only grow. I don't think that's a bird that's declining in population or range.
No, I would say they're growing. I mean, even here where we are, so I'm in my hometown at my buddy's house here in Waseca, Minnesota. And when I was living here 12 years ago, you would very occasionally see a sandhill. And we went for just a short drive looking at some goose hunting spots yesterday.
Yeah, just last night.
Probably half a dozen standing right next to the truck, and heard and saw other ones flying by. I mean, that was never a thing before. Now,
and in the spring now too. In the last few years here in central southern Minnesota, in the spring we're seeing a lot of them.
So, anyways, I don't know that any of us are super interested in sandhills.
Yeah, maybe we can move on from sandhills.
We'll probably talk more about sandhills than any of us are really interested. But
right. So you're staging for Game Fair, huh? Are you going to Game Fair this weekend?
I'm going to go up there and just talk to people. I haven't been there for a long time. I'm actually going to go up and meet a buddy of mine, Rick Stosky, if you know of him. He's a dog trainer. I'm going to talk to him and actually Sean Stahl at the same time. Go up to their place and hang out, and then go.
Are you going to hunt? Is the season?
No, we don't have a season yet. Minnesota opens. Like North Dakota has that same deal. We used to have it in South Dakota. I just have a hard time. Luckily, I'm glad South Dakota got rid of it. We can't do it anymore.
It's hard. I messed with it one season.
It's just it's hot. It's 90 degrees.
It's hot. It's buggy, which I sound like a complainer, but it's just got an extra element of summer to it that just doesn't feel right. And the birds don't respond to calls very well.
No, or decoys. They kind of just land. And it's not to say that you can't decoy them then. But
you can, because I've heard stories of some just awesome hunts.
Yeah,
it can happen, but the consistency to it is not there whatsoever.
We had some really good hunts, but then you'd have the next hunt, and you thought was going to be lights out, and every bird would individually, like flocks, would just they don't seem to have that like grouping behavior yet, where they're worried about coming to other geese, so they just land throughout the field. And if you're not lucky and they just start coming to you, you're going to have a mess, and you end up spending more time chasing geese off the backside of the field than you do actually hunting. So.
Yep. And on water too, they don't land together whatsoever. They want to be separate. And it feels weird too. Like a few years ago when I tried it for the first time, I would just look at the water I'm on and I just think to myself, why am I not fishing? You only have so much time to fish open water up here, Why am I not fishing right now? The waterfowl season is coming.
Yeah, the September season is such a different deal.
It is.
That's actually what we were doing last night when we were driving around. Is about a mile south of where we're sitting. We have a really cool spot to goose hunt. It's just a big green grass field with some ditches running through it, like maybe 2 feet deep. And we've got, it's not a pit blind, but it's like a half sunk, like a A-frame type thing that we built in there. So we're pretty much sunk to the ground level with just a little bit of taller grass around us. And it's not, there are actually geese using this grass, but we're not chasing those. We're chasing that molt migration that comes through. And for some reason, right where we are, right at that exact spot is kind of like a beeline where a couple flight paths come through.
2 lines that come through this one spot.
So it's like this, it's a super fun spot. You can go out there, you can set 100 decoys or just leave them because it doesn't matter. Because it's new birds every day that you're calling at. So that's that'll actually be my first goose hunting this year, because I won't be able to chase geese till probably 19th or 20th of September till I get back from my elk hunt this year. So
right, where are you going?
Going to Colorado in a week to chase mule deer in like super high country, and then we're leaving straight from that to go to Montana for an elk hunt. So I'll be gone like 25 days. Living out of a bed.
Holy cow. That's awesome.
I'm trying to get a bunch of these things recorded and done ahead of time, so I've got some stuff to cover me while I'm gone for almost a month. So it'll be fun. I'll probably be really sick of Mountain House by then, and I'll probably come back with looking like the Unabomber with my beard out of control and lost 10 pounds, I hope, would be awesome. And my hair, what little I have, will be frazzled and looking pretty rough. So, but hopefully I've got about 500 pounds of meat in the cooler with me when I come home. So I'll be ready to rock at that point.
That'd be awesome.
We've never done the Colorado thing, so I'm a little nervous. Like, I'm not ever normally nervous about a hunting trip, but I'm kind of nervous because we're going to be at like 11,000, 12,000 feet. And I've never actually been that high other than in a vehicle, and probably not even then, I guess, really. I don't think many roads go up and over passes like that. So it'll be interesting to see how I handle the altitude and all that. And I've been trying to get in shape for it, but you never know until you get there and you got 50 pounds on your back and you're at 11,000 feet and you're huffing and puffing. But I think it'll be okay, but it'll be fun. I'm super looking forward to it. So we'll see how it goes, I guess. Have you ever done that? Have you done much big game hunting other than whitetail?
No, I drew a cow archery tag for Kentucky about 5 years ago. 5 years ago. And I literally had, I think, 4 days to hunt because I had a DU trip coming up, just the way it fell. And I didn't know anything about it. I'm like, all right, I draw this tag. I'm like, all right, what do? Do you set a deer stand? I've zero experience elk hunting. And I've never watched any videos, but I will say I went out there, basically just freelanced it myself on, so it's Daniel Boone National Forest. In my zone, I had an opportunity, and I ranged her at about 50 yards in the woods, and my arrow went just right under her. And when she took off, I knew that was
the chance.
A really good archer. I should have smoked her, to be honest with you, but my bow's not the latest and greatest by any means.
It's just that
50 yards.
Deal too is you got a wild animal standing in front of you. It's a whole different scenario.
I know.
My first, so I'd never had elk hunted until 2 falls ago. And I told myself, you know what? I'm not getting any younger. I need to do this. A couple of guys that I worked with were all about it. 3 different guys that I worked with at Cabela's were huge into the backpack, hunting, backcountry type stuff. And they all shot nice elk with their bows year after year. I'm like, you know what? I need to go do this. So I just put in for the Black Hills of South Dakota, and I had a few chances, and you give me a shotgun in my hand, and I'm super comfortable, super confident, no worries. But you put a bow in my hand, and I'm not an archer by birth. Like, I don't do it enough to be natural for it. So I had these times where if a guy would have been like I am with a shotgun, I would have smoked them. I mean, elk at 20 yards, elk at 30 yards, they weren't exactly perfect for me, and I missed it. Well, my little trip then ran out, and I made a trip back for like a 3-day run, and I had one come into I think it was 35 yards or 38 yards, and I had a 20, 30, and a 40-yard pin on my bow that year, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, bottom pin. Well, I had another pin stuck all the way down at the bottom of my sight that I used. It was just an extra.
Oh no!
And so I'm thinking bottom pin, and I put that thing on, and I watched that arrow fly. I mean, I'm talking like 4 feet over its back.
10 yards over.
And I'm like, I sat there in just amazement, and so disappointed, thinking, I busted my butt. I'd lost like 25 pounds that year getting in shape for this, and I was shooting every night, and I'm like, what could have happened? And I go and I look for my arrow. I find it back in the woods, and I'm thinking, I look at my pins, and I'm like, son of a bitch. I know exactly what happened. I was so nervous that this elk was standing there in front of me that I used the bottom pin, which was probably like an 80-yard pin or something. I don't even know. And I was so bummed. Well, the good thing is I got back into that herd and shot a cow that later that afternoon. But yeah, there's something about that kind of stuff that, I gave up a little bit of my September goose hunting to do it. I guess I'm glad that I did, because it's a whole different experience than what I've done for a long time that time of year. So especially to have it like close to you like that in Kentucky, you're really lucky. I imagine that your tag opportunities probably are not really easy.
Not that great. No, I think they give away 1,000 tags a year. I've put in every year. I've only drawn once. My buddy, one of my best friends, has drawn 2 bulls within 6 years apart. Oh. And how that happens, I have no idea. I mean, that does not happen. So he's been very fortunate. He's killed 2 bulls. But yeah, I mean, you put in, it's only $10 per draw. You can put in 4 different draws, and you just hope for the best. But if I lived out west, I would definitely be an elk hunter. I love the solitude of it. I love the camping part. I mean, it was -5 at night when we were out there camping. I loved it.
Oh, it's fun.
I mean, I could get into it.
Well, if you like turkey hunting and you obviously like duck and goose hunting, and some people will probably try to rip me on this, but in my experience, elk hunting is almost identical to turkey hunting, especially if you hunt in big country. If you are hunting like someone's farmyard and that's your turkey hunting experience, then it's definitely not the same. But to me, I've hunted turkeys in Montana, the Black Hills of South Dakota, which are like a mini mountain type scenario. And I can't think of hardly anything that I do tactic wise that's different other than worry about smell. I mean, of course, there's some differences between the animal, but they react really similar to how a turkey does. And so to me, I'm not a professional elk hunter by any means. I don't want to pretend that I am, but I feel like I grasped the basics are super easy just from having that turkey hunting experience. And, even just from like the waiting, okay, there's how to move around an animal to get in front of them. How are they going to respond to a call? Where can they come to the call? How do you get yourself set up the right spot for that? And then you just add on that dealing with the scent and the wind. And if you got that part figured out, I mean, you're set up for success. I mean, at least at some level, and, a few years is going to help. But if a guy's a good proficient turkey hunter in like big country, he's going to have a pretty good head start on elk. So
it's that game of chess.
Yeah, exactly.
That just they make a move, you make a move. Like I would rather spring turkey hunt than anything. Like I love spring turkey hunting more than I love waterfowl hunting.
I can totally understand.
I don't fall, but at the same time, I'm not really that eager to go shoot Merriam's or Rios. I love hunting Easterns. I love shooting them in hardwood timber.
Yes.
Yes. I love that.
I love them in timber.
When you say if I have to hunt a big open field, my excitement level drops to like half or even less. Like I love shooting them in the woods.
That's perfect. That's one of the things I want to talk to you about is how important, because this for me, like the methods that I do things is super important.
And becoming more important too.
Yeah,
it's not that we're old guys, but as we get older.
Yeah, well, I would say for me, a lot of it's been that way for quite a while. Like, if once my podcasts are released and people hear us, I mean, I'm a duck water hunter. I don't dry field hunt really at all, and it's just by choice. And I turkey hunt. Like I try to hunt that big country. I try to hunt places where turkeys have maybe more of a chance. And then we actually will in mornings. We will literally walk on our way out to a place and we'll walk underneath turkeys in a guy's farmyard or his feedlot to go a mile and a half further out to where they're all wild turkeys, but where the turkeys that aren't going to be the gimmies are. And those ones are hard. And so like, I love to hear that. Like, I love to hunt them in hardwoods. Like I love that statement because to me, it's the same thing. Like we don't have a lot of big hardwoods where we hunt. We hunt a lot of like, river breaks and stuff. So it's like on top of tops of these hills will be grassland, and then the bottoms will be some draws filled with trees. But these Merriams are not like an Eastern in that they don't need that. They don't need to be in the woods near as much. So you'll catch them out on the edge of these grasslands a lot.
Yeah.
So we're sitting at the edge of the trees and you're calling them along that edge, typically what happens. But man, when I get a chance to like set up in the bottom of one, and because we use those bottoms of the woods for walkways a lot because they can't see you. And we'll float call as we're going through there. And God, when I get one going and it's in the bottom, I'm just like as happy as can be because there's a totally different experience when they come in that woods looking for you rather than out on, because like they can't see as well versus out in that open field, like you said, where they know kind of what the story is there. But man, they come through that woods. God, I love that. There's something about that is like it's way more intimate, I think.
Well, when you and the bird are both in the woods too, do you feel like you're almost more on an even playing field?
Yeah.
Like not one has a distinctive advantage over the other.
Yeah, I would say you do have a little bit like it's a similar idea in that because you're kind of like you're in the same environment, you're in the same territory as them. So yeah, I would say that's for sure similar. Like, what's your take on? We'll get off turkeys here in a minute, but what's your take on blinds for turkeys?
How do I put this?
If you were to walk out into a field, would you typically be carrying a blind or no?
So I will not condemn any method. I do not care for ground blinds. I don't like them. Now, will I say that I'll never hunt one? No. In fact, when you take a 5-year-old, you better be in a ground blind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a time I'm not to the point to where I say I'll never hunt one no matter what, because they're not my preference. I don't care for them. I don't like decoys. My ideal turkey hunt is in the woods with no decoy, just calling that bird to you. That is, if I could do that every time, I would. I'm not going to not kill a bird when it gets later in the season and it's just getting my butt kicked and it's going to rain for 5 days straight. And if I'm hunting with my wife or my kid and I know that let's just go out there and enjoy ourselves, I might sit in a blind, but I am not a fan of them.
I'm in the exact same boat.
And I'm also the type that I'm never going to say never. There's people that say, oh, I'll never do this. I'll never do that. Well, watch what you say, because when you say that, you better not ever do it.
There's a time and a place for everything.
Right.
Like
there's a time and a place for everything.
I don't enjoy hunting out of them near as much. And I broke my own rule. I hunted out of them one day this year with my bow. I was gonna get one without a bow or with a bow without a blind. And I got busted a few days in a row. I had turkeys at 5 yards and just couldn't shoot them. Like, I'm bringing the blind. So I did use one. Yeah. But with my gun, that's where I can come close to saying never, just simply because when you have it, it feels like a different experience. Like I almost feel like you're watching them on TV rather than being like where your every move, like where your eyes, you're worried about blinking when they're at 20 yards and they're in the woods when you're in there with them. But when you're back in that blind, it just kind of feels like you're tucked away and you can be playing around and you can get away with stuff, and it doesn't.
You can get away with anything.
I don't get as excited.
Close.
Like, I've shot. I've lost track. I have to be somewhere close to 100 turkeys that I've shot, and I still get like my heart is pounding, and I'm beaten, and I'm going crazy when a turkey comes in. And the times I've done it in a blind, like every time I've done it, I just don't feel like I ever had that. Like I was never nervous. I'm like, that just doesn't. It's not the same experience for me. I know some people absolutely love it, and there's times where maybe you need it depending on the scenario. And I know I'll guarantee I would have shot more turkeys if I was more inclined to use a blind.
Right.
But I just feel like I would rather take than shooting less turkeys, but doing it the way I like to do it.
For sure. And it's up to the individual on what they enjoy, where they get their excitement. Is it more effective? If you were just wanting to kill birds, I believe that a blind with a decoy in the right spot, and if you have the patience to sit there for 4 hours, it's more effective. I mean, I've seen it time and time again. I don't have the patience, and I enjoy turkey season to get away from the months of what I just went through waterfowl hunting. Like, I was talking to my wife, and again, we were sitting in a blind. It was like the second to the last day of the season. It was raining, and I find myself in a blind sometimes when I want to have a social event with somebody while I'm turkey hunting. Like, for example, there's a landowner that I turkey hunt with. He's a farmer. He's busy. I try to get him on a bird. The only way I'm going to be able to get him on a bird consistently is put him in a blind. And while I'm in that blind, we're talking about, he was my woodshop teacher in school. We're cutting up. We're enjoying the experience, you know. He really doesn't even care about shooting a bird. He just loves being out there for a few hours before he goes to work. So that's where a blind, I think, is very important. But I was sitting in the blind with my wife, and I'm just like, what am I doing? Why am I not enjoying this? Why am I sitting here not enjoying this? I'm like, because it feels like what I've been doing during duck season. I'm sitting in a blind, drinking coffee. I've got my decoys out. I'm just doing random calling, hoping a bird decoys into my decoys. This is duck hunting turkeys.
Walks in silently.
Or I'm deer hunting.
Yep, deer hunting is what it feels more like to me.
Yes.
I'm just waiting for them to walk by.
Yeah. So my style of hunting is I'm walking. If I'm sitting down, it's because there's a gobbler and he's answering, and then or I'm mushroom hunting, or for me, it's an active. I want to be walking. It's just, but I'm not going to bash ground blinds.
No, I won't either. They're super effective. There's no doubt. The thing I've hated about them is I love to walk. Like, we're moving when we're hunting, and I mean, we'll put on. Because we hunt, like I said, big country. There's days we'll put on 8 to 10 miles roaming. And the thing that I love, the thing I don't like about having a ground blind is it feels like you're anchored to a spot. Because it's kind of a thing that you're like, oh man, we got to take this blind down, then we got to put it back up, and then you give more chance to be seen as you're messing around with the blind. So, yeah, I'm not keen on them. They're effective and they work, and people kill a ton of turkeys out of them, but they're not for me. Which actually, you know, speaking of methods, and this may or may not be the case, but looking through your photos, I don't see a lot of spinning wing decoys.
We don't use them nearly as much as we used to. Mm-hmm. You know, there was a time when we used them, but here in the last 3 or 4 years, they don't work for us. Yep. The spinning wing, in my opinion, is an attractor. It's great for getting their attention. It's not great at finishing birds. So the attractor that we use is actually Canada goose floaters. They're big. They have high contrast. Ducks love being with them anyway. So they're dark. That is our attractor, and it's great at finishing birds. Yep. And plus, I'm tired of running out there and trying to shut a daggone spinner off when the geese start flying, because they do not like
Man, you were just like repeating everything that I would say about them. I quit using them, I think 3 years ago now. And more out of choice. I mean, they I was actually on, I recorded the podcast with the guys from Banded, and I was on theirs just a few days ago, and that we got into the spinner question a little bit. And that's exactly one of the things I said is they're an attractant from a long ways away. I mean, you see them from miles, but that finishing, the way a duck finishes nowadays without a spinner is so much prettier than how they semi-finish with a finish. Like they come in, it's almost like one of my buddies always describes it as they come in softer. Like they come and they hover and they're not so edgy and worried, like they'll actually come and sit down. And so just for me, that extra like few seconds of interaction with each flock when they're that close is super worth. I mean, I shouldn't say having to blow my duck call, but getting to blow my duck call louder and more aggressive to hit that attention grabbing thing rather than have that spinner. So I noticed that we were looking through some of your Instagram pictures last night and I'm like, I don't see a spinner. Maybe he's one of us.
Yeah, I don't own a spinner. I think my brother might have one. But here in the last few years, they never make it to the boat. They might make it out there once or twice a season, but we're always on the same deal. It's like, yank it. It's not helping. And the worst case is once you get past the early morning and you start getting to midday when the geese are going to start flying, we don't want it out there anymore.
It's just, my life has become so much easier. It seems like I don't have to come home and charge batteries. I don't have to worry about getting the mojo poles out in the right spot. You're not dealing with that clunk, 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 clunk. There's no arguments about maybe we should put out more mojos or maybe we need to move them or, we need to change the direction or kill them. Like you said, the geese are coming. There's all these little things that I think it improves the quality of your hunt for one. And it makes you a better hunter too, because you're not relying on that thing to do it for you. You have to use like your skills, whether it's putting decoys out or being in the right spot or blowing a duck call. So
learning how to hide, put in the extra hour in the morning to camouflage the blind or whatever you're hunting out of.
Yeah, exactly. All the extra little things that makes a guy a duck hunter or a waterfowler and not just a duck killer. So that's kind of one of my takes on it. So yeah,
but at same time, I'm not condemning them. No, I'm not condemning guys that use them.
No, I would agree. I have no problem with people using them. I mean, and I'll still say I think they are effective, and a lot of ducks get killed over them. And if a guy's going to dry field hunt, I mean, that's
especially in the fields.
They work. There's no question. Yeah. That's almost why I don't like them, is because that they do work so well for that.
They're so effective.
It's changed the way that people hunt. I mean, there's a lot less of a reliance on scouting, especially in a field. You still have to scout, but I know that guys will just set up in a field put 6 spinners out around here and hope to traffic ducks going overhead, and they've got enough flash going that they do it. And so it's given a lot more people opportunities and a lot more success. There's no doubt there. So I just thought when you started talking about I don't remember what it was that exactly got us onto it about turkey hunting in the woods,
turkey
blinds,
in the woods,
blinds, to that. Like I just kind of had a feeling you were like the guy that made a point to do things a certain way. And there's a lot of people, it doesn't matter how you get the deer or how you get the greenheads or whatever. It's just the picture at the end and the result is what's important. And to me, it's almost the process that's more important, I think, than that end. I mean, I always tell people I'd rather shoot like 5 greenheads for me over the water in a cool spot, out of my boat blind, hidden well and have them finish great, than 25 greenheads out of a cornfield with 10 robos spinning and not having. I mean, maybe they do finish well typically, but I'd rather do it the other way. And to me, I take more enjoyment out of that. And there's guys who like it absolutely opposite because they don't like wearing waders or they don't want to be wet or who knows, whatever reason. But I know guys who don't like to shoot them on the water because they look bad for pictures. So I'm like, oh, whatever, man. I like a wet looking mallard. So
yep.
I love hunting anything you can call.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So I love coyote hunting. I love turkey hunting. I love, duck and goose hunting. I would love elk hunting if I lived out west. So anytime you add something to the hunt that takes away from the art of calling, like a spinner or a strutter decoy, or I'm not even a fan. I don't really enjoy coyote hunting over electronic calls. I love an open reed call.
Yeah,
I love
cool
doing the calling. So anytime you keep adding new gimmicks or tricks, I'm not saying they don't work. They do work.
No doubt.
But it's just one less reason why it takes away from the call itself. So I would maybe it's my age. I'm at the point now where I'm willing to kill less, but it'd be more rewarding. I could go jump shoot mallards too if I wanted to.
Yeah.
I don't have an interest in it. I want to shoot that mallard backpedaling. I can shoot that duck at 45 yards passing over the blind, over the trees, going the other way. But I really want to get him right there backpedaling over the decoys. You know,
it just takes on everything takes on a whole new meaning once you like prescribe like that little bit of I don't even know what you call it exactly, but once you put your own values on that part of it, like on the method, like your hunt takes on a whole different aspect, I think. And when there's days that I'm sure that I know we could have gone out and we could have days that we didn't kill a limit that we could have if we would have shot those birds overhead or shot those ones that swung a little bit and maybe didn't come in how we wanted. But none of us are ever going to complain at the end of the day, because my whole hunting group, we all pretty much feel the same, that, you know what, who cares? I mean, we're not dying. We're not hunting because we're starving to death. I mean, there's always another option for food. Granted, I actually love to eat them, but it's not like we're dying out here. And so you kind of put what you want on it. And it's one of the things I've been paying more attention to, is that the steps of what a hunter takes, you know, the process, like the 5 steps. And I feel like I've got like 3 things going. I like the kill. I mean, I still like to shoot. I mean, you won't find many guys who are good at hunting that don't still like to shoot. But then that method, and then the method is probably the biggest part for me right now, I think is where I'd say I'm at. So it's kind of cool to see other people that do it. And it's funny that you mentioned the strutter, because I feel the same about that. It's like a mojo sitting out there. The things can't, they just come barreling in, just stupid to it.
So that's why you got kind of quiet with me when I was telling you I wanted to buy a strutter decoy. Huh?
Yeah, that would be it.
What'd he say?
Bill just mentioned, he goes, that's why you got quiet with me when I was talking about buying a strutter decoy. So I just don't approve of them. They work, but I don't like to carry one around.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really enjoy carrying them. I own one. Sometimes I might use it, but I can remember like it was yesterday, the first time I ever had a decoy ruin a turkey hunt.
Oh, yeah.
This gobbler was on a line, and I mean, he was answering the call, coming to the call. Now, this was early. I was in college, and I had a Delta, a hen decoy made by Delta, I think was the decoy brand. This gobbler was on a line. I could see him. I had a straight line of view, but he could not see my decoy yet. He's marching. And as soon as he saw that decoy, that head went up, he folded them wings back, and he did the nervous walk run right into the woods.
I've seen that
and at that moment, I was like, forget that, you know. I love being in the woods where that bird is hunting you. And just the fact that you can hear him. You can't see him. He's within kill range. You still can't see him. And he's just, that gobble's getting louder and getting louder.
And better yet,
it gives me goosebumps thinking about it. Oh, gosh.
Oh, I love it.
I've said before, someone's going to find me dead in the woods with a heart attack.
From that.
Because, like one of the early Zinc videos, when we first started videoing turkey hunts, it was our first turkey time video. There was a hunt I did up in Ohio. Jimmy Wren was videoing. I had this gobbler come in, and you can hear my heart pumping through the wireless mic. Oh. Like, all you hear is, you just hear that.
I know exactly that. You think the turkey's going to hear it.
Oh, my gosh. Like, I haven't lost it. I'm like, and then even through, like, college and even in high school, people are like, you know, there's like, oh, well, don't do drugs. Don't get hooked on all this stuff. And I've always said, if there was a drug that gives me more of an adrenaline rush than hunting, I don't want no part of it, because I can't handle it. I can't handle a gobbler coming in without halfway freaking out.
I love it. I can't. I'm so glad that I started turkey hunting. An old boss of mine got me going on it. And like before that, the spring meant nothing to me, but it wasn't a big deal. But now, I don't know if you followed any of my, I don't know how long you've been following me on Instagram, I guess, but I was lucky to I think I was gone for over 20 straight days turkey hunting on like 3 separate trips, all just continuous. And it was like some of the best 3 weeks of my life, like with hunting with different buddies in different places. Yeah. And I probably saw 10 turkeys die in that time period or more. And it was so awesome. Like the spring is just like this whole new thing for me since I started turkey hunting. And it's been since I was 25 years old. So it's been a while now, but man, like it just, like I couldn't imagine if I had to quit turkey hunting, what I would do. I'd have to go out I'd still have to chase them just to hear that.
Yeah.
Just to hear that boom.
Oh, gosh. Boom. Yeah.
Cool. So, you know, you were just talking about when you were working with Zinc and that, And it kind of leads in perfect to one of the things that I think a lot of people could get some good information from you on this, and just advice is it's probably, I think most people who probably are listening probably won't be super young, but so when I talked about how I knew you as a goose caller, I think did you ever come to any goose calling contests in Minnesota back in like the early 2000s? I don't remember if I ever saw you at any.
I don't think so. It doesn't ring a bell because we weren't.
You would have been at the Avery though in probably like 2002 or 3, huh?
I started working for Zinc in August of 2002.
Okay.
I'd been contest calling for 4 years up till that point, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, so you would have been. Did you ever go to the Avery in Illinois? The Avery International.
The International.
Yeah. I think I
I
remember seeing you there. Is where it was. I went there with another guy that was a contender to win back in the day, and and then so I saw you there, and then then all of a sudden like you start winning stuff, and then you were like the guy for quite a few years there. And one thing I remember about the calling scene when I was always around it is you run into a lot of guys, kids, typically younger guys that are 16 to 25 years old, that are very good goose callers or duck callers, and they're looking desperately for kind of to make a name for themselves, which I think everybody wants to do at some point, but they're looking to get teamed up with a manufacturer or a sponsor or whatever it was. And I feel like I kind of like watched you progress through that scene, and you did it in a way that I super respect, because it didn't seem like you were the guy out there chasing that. And I think you would have some good advice for how, because I remember like, I have this feeling like that Fred probably like found you based on your calling ability. But I remember you were simple things like you were clean cut and you were always professional. You were never on the internet raising a ruckus over things. And maybe that's just part of it. But maybe for those guys that maybe just talk about how you kind of like use goose calling and what you did to like separate yourselves from other people to start off with the guy who was the biggest guy in waterfowl at that time, and then to become another one of those guys yourself.
Right. So basically, if I was to sum up the question is, so if you've, and I'm basically just kind of rewording it based on how I'm going to answer it, is so you get these young guys, or even older guys, doesn't matter, if they're wanting to talk to manufacturers about teaming up, call it sponsorships, call it cross promotion, call it whatever, then you can lump them into they're wanting to get into the hunting industry. Yep. So therefore, I think it's safe to say they're wanting to make a living, or they're wanting to, make a living out of it, some shape or form. Now, I always have the question for people is, what do you want to do? Like, nobody hunts for a living. Unless you're guiding an Africa hunt or something. Nobody makes a living just pulling the trigger. Either A, you can be a guide and you're taking someone. It's not the same. You're providing a service.
Definitely not the same.
It's not the same. Definitely. I've been there and done that, and I knew really quick that was not my cup of tea at all. So everybody in the hunting industry provides some sort of a service. Whether you're a photographer like yourself, whether you work in sales, whether you work in promotion, marketing, engineering, everybody does something. And hunting is just the industry itself. So I think what my advice for somebody wanting to get into the hunting industry is, one, you need to look at it as any other type of business. What do you enjoy doing? Do you enjoy talking to people? Because I know a lot of really good callers who do not enjoy talking to people. They don't need to be in customer service, I can promise you that. Are they good at designing products? Are they good? What skill set do you want to develop? And don't say you want to get better at calling ducks and geese and shooting them, because you still have to have something else to offer.
That's not a skill to bring to someone.
You have, correct. So these companies, let's say, I don't want to call out any specific brands or companies, but let's say there's a decoy company, you need to look at them as no different than a car manufacturer, a camera manufacturer, or somebody who manufactures lawnmowers or whatever. They're a manufacturing company. They just happen to make a product that you use as your pastime and free time that you truly love and have a passion for. But they're still a company that is in the business of making money. So, you know, if you're going to be a part of their marketing program or whatever, you have to have something to bring to the table, something to offer them. And my advice is discover what your skill set is going to be, whether you're going to be a writer, a photographer, a videographer, work in customer service, public relations, marketing, graphic design, engineering, and focus on being the best you can be. And the rest will take care of itself. The companies will find you. That's just, you know, it's, and again, I'm not the best at answering that question because the situations I've always ended up in, I just feel very blessed to be at the right time, at the right place, and being very lucky. Because I remember I kind of injected myself. I wanted to be, there's two things I ever wanted to do in my life that I realized in high school was work in the hunting industry or join the military. I have all my family members, they're all longtime military. My dad's Vietnam veteran. My grandfathers are Marine veterans, World War II veterans. And I wanted to work in the hunting industry or join the military. And I was sitting in college lost. Like I was going to class, I was doing okay, but I was like, this is not what I want to do. And I also reached a point in my contest calling career. So this is before social media. This is before YouTube. I'm this kid in Kentucky, in central Kentucky, not even known for waterfowl hunting. And I was going to calling contests in southern Illinois, eastern shore of Maryland, and I was beat before I even stepped up on stage because I went into it with no confidence, thinking, looking at all these guys from southern Illinois and thinking they deserve it more than I do because they live in the waterfowl meccas. They, you know, they're call makers. I can't beat these guys. And I finally got fed up with feeling like that. And I made the decision that I wanted to go work somewhere in the country as ground level grunt guide. I didn't care even if I got paid. I just wanted to insert myself into really good waterfowl hunting to kind of work my way up, to learn the ropes, really. So then that way I could go to these calling contests and say, you know what? I worked for a month and a half for an outfitter. I set decoys. I worked my butt off. Nobody's working harder than I am. I deserve to be here just as much as you guys do. And that was kind of my way with mentally wrapping my head around, all right, well, I'm from Kentucky. Hunter Grounds is from southern Illinois. How am I supposed to beat him, and why do I deserve to beat him? You know? So just, and where the story's going, so then that's how I met Fred, was because I was going to shows working for a call maker. I originally, before I started working for Zinc Calls, there was a call maker out of Louisville, a guy named Carl Lossman. He made custom duck and goose calls, and I traveled around with his family, not making a penny, just traveled around with them, and I would help them sell calls at shows and in trade.
And that's all she wrote. So you can hear some of the spots where things were fading out rapidly, and it just ended in a dead silence, although we didn't know it at the time. So thanks for hanging in there, guys, as we learn what's going on and how to run this thing. And hopefully that's something. That's the first and last time we'll ever have anything like that happen, because it was a big bummer, as the last 30 minutes were also some really cool stuff. But as it is, that's all she wrote. So thanks for listening, and we will catch up with you next week.